Welcome to the Advertising Forum. This is episode 2 of our new identity series, sponsored by Intent IQ.
We're going to continue off of episode 1 and start with episode 2. We have the same two guests with us today, Fabrice Biergabel, the Vice President of Strategy and Partnerships at Intent IQ, and Art Binder, the Director of Programmatic at Assembly Global. Thanks to you both for being here again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So last time we kicked it off with Art. Today we're going to start with Fabrice. Fabrice, picking up on our last conversation, can you share any real-world examples of clients who really leaned into Intent IQ's identity offering and saw meaningful results from it?
Of course. So first, I will let Art speak to what, Assembly is doing, with us. I'm not going to comment on that. Maybe I'll give just another example of an education brand that we've been working with. And, again, it all comes down to performance eventually. And so we were lucky to be able to measure both incremental reach and incremental performance in a campaign that was targeted at acquiring leads of, candidates for an education program. And so the cookieless part of identity resolution just added about 105% to the reach. So basically doubled the reach. But that is not enough. You got to measure down funnel what's happening. And so we were able also to verify that at the bottom of the funnel, we were getting over 80% additional leads. And so that's kind of an example of an end-to-end, measurement.
Art, do you have any examples of where you've utilized Intent IQ's identity and saw some results for your clients?
Of course. Yeah. So work on a global service client with a very large national U.S. footprint. And from a media standpoint, a big core of that campaign is reaching micro business owners and small business owners. Again, looking at the utilization of mobile phones across this very large audience, it would be a miss to not be looking at a structured way at reaching iOS, right? Because if you just leave programmatic and the DSP to its own fruitions, you'll find that it'll largely favor Android devices and almost overlook the entire iOS database just because it is so difficult to measure and reach. So working with Intent IQ and trying to bridge some of the gaps between multiple measurement partners where we use a third party to measure foot traffic, right? There's still some blocks there between how the mobile IDs are being passed back one another. But the important part is that we are asking the right questions and we're going down the right path to get those solutions. Unfortunately, nothing in the current landscape is easy. I think that's the big takeaway is that we have our work cut out for us, but that's a good thing in a way.
I agree. Art, you touch up on something. There's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of fear. We're an industry that often adapts and adopts to new technologies and regulation and changes, but then there's that level of skepticism that we carry within us. Fabrice, this is more to you. What incentives or learnings can really help people overcome that initial fear and skepticism when selecting a new partner?
First of all, you have to be curious, okay? The reason Art and Assembly is making progress is because they are curious and they don't let fear guide them through inaction. Okay, it starts with that. Then, you're going to make some mistakes, but on the overall, you're going to learn, get better. And in doing so, you'll get also better than your competition because you'll get ahead of the curve. So, we can do our part in this, but it's more, the role of the agency as a partner to be that innovator. From the technology standpoint, we look for things like making sure that it's super easy to turn on these things, to test them, turn them on, turn them off, make it easy. We also have, we also do things like guaranteed performance. There are all sorts of things that we do to facilitate the onboarding for an agency partner. But I just want to say it starts with the agency. And, in the case of Assembly, Art here, he's not only the innovator, he's the expert. He knows what he's talking about. He pushes forward. And not everything works, super smooth all the time, but we're making progress together.
So Fabrice, I love how you just answered that in the beginning about just staying curious and how Assembly does a great job about being curious because unfortunately, a lot of brands and agencies aren't too curious. They go with the same playbook over and over and over again. And so what does the actual onboarding process look like for a new agency or a new brand? And how complicated is the actual integration of an identity solution if someone wants to use a platform like Identity IQ?
And so again, so in our case, the goal is really to make it easy. For addressability, we go like the PMP or Deal ID. Basically, the idea is to curate both inventory and audience into one Deal ID. And that Deal ID is then widely available on any DSP platform. And then, Art can then access it along with different tactics that he's, activating for a campaign. And then it makes it easy to play with and to understand who am I reaching in addition to other tactics and these kind of things. The measurement part is trickier, as Art mentioned earlier. There are cases where today, when you're staying in the digital domain, there are solutions. You can measure end to end. There are solutions. But when you go and start integrating offline, sometimes it's easier than other times. Foot traffic is a little more challenging, but if you get email records of people coming to the store, then you can have a solution. So
let me ask you this then. So how does your team measure success and communicate those insights back to clients like Art?
So in all the campaigns that we run, we also have we have our own full funnel attribution that measures cookieless environments with full funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel. In some cases, however, it may or may not be usable depending on each client scenario. So when you can use it, and you will have the complete view all the way down to the bottom of the funnel. The next level up, you go to CTR. A lot of clients work through CTRs, for example. In those cases, that also can be solved, and you can have a good idea of incrementality via CTR. So there are different ways like this where you can absolutely report complete view of incrementality, but it's not black-white. There are still gray areas, exactly as Art mentioned earlier.
So Art, I want to kick this one over to you then. As identity continues to evolve, what are the next big innovations that you see within the next 6 months, within the next 12 months?
I think that the evolution and the way that we will be able to validate what we're looking at from an identity profiles, right? So Intent IQ has, as Fabrice mentioned, has their own graph and their own schedule. Like, we need to be able to look at Intent IQs and compare that to others, and where there's overlap and match, right? That's sort of your golden ticket. Now, how we further validate this, I think, will really fall on the SPO side of things. And this is something that the industry has been clamoring for years, and it finally push needs to come to shove. And that comes from the cliche of transparency. We need to see more of where our impressions are running, right? To validate that audience is actually reading the content in an ID and cookieless environment, that they're reading the content that we believe. And usually my starting question when I talk to new partners and vendors is like, how do we validate that we are reaching who we think we are reaching?
It's a great question.
Simple enough question, but nobody has an answer to it.
No one.
They're like, look at your conversion. But conversions are click-based now, right? So there's no data there to really make a deterministic. There is no deterministic period of anything. So we need these proxies, and we need more transparency on the supply side in order to validate.
Incredible. What a great way to close out this episode, focusing on transparency, which is such a hot topic and such an important topic for our industry. Fabrice, Art, thank you for being here today. Thank you to our sponsors, Intent IQ. Looking forward to releasing these episodes.
Thank you very much, guys. Wonderful meeting you, ATG.
Nice meeting you as well.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you, Art.